to Studio Fabricana. I'm Miles, and today I'm going to show you how to make this charming burlap table runner. This burlap has been a very strong trend over the last couple of years. It's now available in a range of colors, as well as some prints like the one that we've chosen here. I'm going to show you how to apply this decorative trim, as well as how to make this really charming fringe. It's a great idea for holiday parties or even other special occasions such as weddings. Before we get started on the techniques for this project, let's talk about the amount of fabric that we need. Our table is 5 feet long, and I want a 6-inch overhang at each end, so I'm going to need a total of 6 feet for the project. But I also want to straighten out the grain of the fabric, so I'm going to allow an extra 6 to 8 inches, so we've had about 80 inches cut, about 2 meters of fabric. Burlap is an excellent fabric to demonstrate how to put a fabric on grain because it's very loosely woven. What we need to do is to cut into the fabric right along one thread. Just cut in a little bit, enough that you can grab one of the threads. What you're going to do is gently pull on that thread all the way along the width of the fabric until the thread can pull all the way out. Once you've removed that one thread, it'll give you a guide to cut. You may notice if you're using a printed burlap that the pattern is no longer on grain, but for this project it's very important that we're cutting on grain so that when we fringe the edge, we get a nice even fringe. Once you straighten out the grain on the two ends of the fabric, we're going to have to do the same thing along one edge of the fabric. We don't need to do both sides because we're going to be cutting the fabric into the width of our table runner. So we only need to straighten out that one edge. So we're going to repeat the same procedure, just cutting into the fabric so that I can grab one long thread and remove the thread along the whole length of the fabric. So once we've pulled the thread and removed the selvage from one long end, from that end we're going to measure the width of our runner. And a nice width is about 14 inches, so that's what we're going to do. And we're just going to make a notch in our fabric and a small cut just like we did when we were straightening out our fabric. And now we're going to follow the same process and pull a thread, and that is going to indicate for us the width of our runner. One of the main features of this runner is going to be the decorative trim. This is for two purposes. One, obviously, to add some beauty to our table runner. The other is, when we sew it onto the runner, it's going to help to stop the edge from fraying more than we want it to. Before you go to the store to pick your trim, figure out how much you're going to need and always get a few more inches just to be safe. So, because it's very difficult to stop and start the ribbon at a corner, we're going to start sewing about 6 inches away from the corner. And what I'm going to do to guide the ribbon is I'm going to line up the edge of the burlap with the 1-inch mark on my sewing machine, and I'm going to use the presser foot as a guide for the ribbon. So as long as I've got those two things lined up, I'll have a perfect 1-inch space between the edge of the ribbon and the edge of the burlap. And you want to sew as close to the edge of the ribbon as you can, just catching that edge in. We're going to continue to sew until we are 1 inch away from the other edge, and you can always leave your needle in, pivot your work, and see if you're there yet, and we're not. So we're just going to go one more stitch down, pivot again, and hopefully at this point, yep, our burlap edge will now line up with the 1-inch mark on our sewing machine. And what we're going to do now is we're going to coax the ribbon around the corner, and we'll be making a mitered corner later, but for the time being, all we want to do is just continue to stitch along the edge of the ribbon. So let's look at that corner technique again. I'm going to continue sewing right in the edge of my ribbon until I'm 1 inch away from the edge of my runner. You can walk those last few stitches by hand and leave your needle down in your work and pivot. We're still a little bit past the 1-inch mark, so I'm going to put in one more stitch, which should take me right to that edge. Again, notice I'm right in the edge of the ribbon. I'm going to pivot it again. I'm going to miter that corner, fold that corner, and bring down my presser foot and continue sewing. As we come to the end, we're going to be overlapping the ribbon, but we don't want a bulky edge. So what we're going to do is twist it back on a 45-degree angle, and then also our join will be less obvious. So to catch in this point where we're overlapped, we're going to start sewing just a little bit before that and catch it in right as we start sewing. Again, we're using our presser foot as a guide to stitch the ribbon very close to the edge. We've engaged our walking foot because we're using a velvet ribbon. We don't want it to twist or shift. Corners, I'm going to do as nice of a little mitered corner as I can to give that nice kind of fold at that edge. And when I get to the inside corner, I'm going to leave my needle in the work and pivot and continue to stitch very close to the edge of the ribbon. Now that we've finished applying our ribbon detail, the next detail we want to work on is actually fringing the edge of the runner. And all the time that we took to straighten out our fabric is coming into play here because it's so easy to remove these pieces, and we're going to have a perfectly fringed edge. You'll lose a little bit in the corners, you'll find, which is to be expected. But once we've removed all of the fringe, till just about the ribbon, our runner will be finished. So now that we've removed the extra fabrics and created the fringe, it really adds to the charm of this burlap table runner, as well as the beautiful velvet ribbon that we've applied. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.